All right, let's turn now to an extended homeroom segment as we do on Wednesdays, where we talk about education issues, and we actually have a double shot of homeroom today. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we will talk to Wisconsin's new Superintendent of the Year. We have had Amy Starzecki on before, Superintendent in the Superior School District, and since that time, she has won that honor, so we're looking forward to visiting with her about that. But first, we're going to talk a bit more about the importance of a good civics education, an appreciation for how government works and how it works best, being an informed voter, all those good things with Kate Ullman, who joins us here from the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition. Kate, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Pat. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, it's nice to see you again. And when we spoke last time, we were in the throes of, an election campaign and talking about, the importance of learning civics at all ages and its significance for folks once they get out into the adult world here. And now that the election has come and gone, there's again that discussion of what are we teaching in terms of a civics education in Wisconsin, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, all of those things. And so I wanted to get your standpoint from a coalition standpoint, post-election, and your feelings on, again, the importance of teaching civics in Wisconsin schools.
Yeah, well, our coalition, the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition, is comprised of about 20 organizations and then a lot of other individuals who want to see stronger civics education in our state. And just to set the stage a little bit for that, Wisconsin is one of 11 states that do not require students to take a government class to graduate from high school. We've done a survey across the state a couple years ago to see how many schools do have a required civics course. And it's about 75% of schools in the state where students do take a government or civics class to graduate. That also is about 75% of students. So when you look at it by the numbers, who are taking a class before they graduate. But that leaves 25% of kids who don't take a government class to graduate. And I think that's one of the concerns of our coalition, is trying to make sure that all students have access to really high quality civic learning, really fantastic and engaging experiences before they graduate from high school.
You're putting this in a nice positive manner. I'm hearing the 25% don't get it, and I just want to hang my head. I mean, seriously. And I know other people do. And look, it's not just a class for the sake of having a class. There's this real life utility in it. And on your website, which is civicswi.org, you cite a survey by the Center for Information and Research on Civil Learning and Engagement that says 3 out of 4 youths say they have the power to change the country, but just 2 out of 5 say they feel well qualified to participate in politics, and just under 1 in 4 cast a ballot. So this isn't education for the sake of education. There is some real personal empowerment that comes with a good civics education.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you're right that it's not enough to just check the box and say, oh, did you take a class or not? We want to really see high quality civics education that is drawing on the best practices in the field. And that means using controversial issues discussion, using simulations of like authentic civic processes, things that really engage students, and making sure that it's relevant to them so that they feel empowered and ready to be voters when they turn 18. I'll give you a little bit of an example of some schools that are doing a fantastic job of that. My day job is as the executive director of the Legislative Semester, which is an organization that supports teachers that use a simulation-based civic learning curriculum. So there's about, I think, 12 schools in Wisconsin that use this now, 8 in Dane County, some in Milwaukee County, and we're looking to expand across the state next year to some other regions around Eau Claire area and the Green Bay area. And the students who do the legislative semester, they basically create a House of Representatives in their school. So by the end of the semester, they're in the auditorium, they're debating and voting on the bills that they've written. And they've got elected leadership who's presiding over the session. We're talking 200 students. And it's just incredibly engaging for students. And research has demonstrated that when they have this experience, they're more interested in politics and policymaking, and they're more likely to vote and be engaged in the future, and they're more open-minded. And I think that's just really, really essential, is that we're helping students learn about the process, but we're not contributing to the sort of toxic polarization that we've seen in recent years in our whole larger political system.
That is a great point. I know that when I first mentioned, our guest for today, there was a comment on Facebook saying, well, there shouldn't be indoctrination in schools. Exactly. So how about if we give a good, well-rounded education so that folks are less susceptible to being indoctrinated, I don't know, by basic cable TV hosts or things like that. So when we come back after the break, I'm going to talk more to Kate Ullman from the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition. We're going to talk about, what she just said, dealing with controversial topics. And is that going to be made a little bit more difficult when you have, state legislatures around the country that are actually trying to limit the use of certain words, trying to limit the discussion on topics? Makes it a little bit tougher to teach people to be good voters in the future for the topics we're all going to have to deal with here in the real world. That and much more with Kate Ullman, Amy Starzecki coming up as well. But first, wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this Wednesday morning, when you're here, you're up north, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. And by the way, this hour's keyword is toy. Text it in now. Christina Aguilera's birthday today, Billie Eilish and others. You can catch that in today's history lesson every weekday morning at 6:50 here on Up North News Radio on this Wednesday, December 18th. Only 7 days left until Christmas. Sign up for our daily newsletter. Head over to upnorthnewswi.com. Click subscribe up at the top of the page. And in there, one of the articles is all about some of the best holiday light displays around Wisconsin. And they list a lot of them. There's Wildwood Zoo in Marshfield and Regner Park in West Bend, Evergreen Park in Sheboygan. I, of course, am partial toward the Christmas Village in Chippewa Falls here at Irvine Park. So read up on those, a link to seeing an even longer list of them around Wisconsin. That's at upnorthnewswi.com. Or, if you wish, you can share your own favorites here that you want us to talk about by calling or texting us at 855-75-CIVIC. Always nice to hear from you. Or put something in the comments section of Facebook or YouTube, where you can also watch us do the show live every weekday morning. Let's bring back Kate Ullman now from the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition. And in talking about civics, we'll get back to there's theory and there's practice. We'll come back to theory in a minute. Let's go to practice. The actual participation by young people this year, there was so much energy, especially among certain folks after Vice President Kamala Harris joined the ticket. I recall talking to the granddaughter of a delegate who had to come to the National Convention in Chicago because she was so inspired by the changes that were out there. And the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition certainly is one that encourages people to be voters right away when you turn 18. So from a standpoint of both voter registration and any other volunteerism or other activities, how would you rate that from the way Wisconsin young people embraced or stayed away from this presidential campaign this year?
Well, I think one of the challenges of a presidential campaign is that there's such a huge focus on the presidential race and the top of the ticket. And it's really a lot of drama. And it actually is off-putting sometimes to young people. So one of the things that I encourage the teachers I'm working with to do this year is to really look at the election as more holistically and look at all the different races and help students understand that, when they're voting in a local school board race, their city council, their county board, their voice really matters in those elections, and those outcomes matter in their communities. And so that's one of the real opportunities for civics education, I think, is to help actually kind of bring the focus away from the federal level and think about like how students have opportunities to engage on the local level. And honestly, it's also a lot less partisan at the local level. We're just really practically trying to solve problems in our communities. So I think that's a huge opportunity.
You're talking up the practical benefits of participating in local elections. I might weep. I'm so happy to hear this. I was so happy when our friends over at Motherhood for Good, of all the different merchandise they put out on T-shirts, one of them that one of my daughters probably wears just says support local elections. And just how important, because civics and civic engagement happens first and foremost at the local level. We're not all involved in a presidential campaign once every 4 years. So
go ahead. Can I just on that point, I want to emphasize that our coalition is really strongly nonpartisan, and in that we are really advocating for nonpartisan civics education, right? And that's essential because our schools need to be nonpartisan spaces. But this is also political. So it's kind of this interesting balance. The approach needs to be nonpartisan, but we also need to allow students to talk about partisan issues and bring their own ideas into the classroom. And also, I think there's this misconception that teachers are indoctrinating students, when in reality, teachers are really there to help give the students skills and knowledge to be active participants. And like we just said, a lot of that is very nonpartisan, especially at the more local level.
Exactly. I recall, I've mentioned before, all those years as an evening, TV anchor, and, not letting on one bit about my own politics. It was about essentially, out there preaching the gospel of, you got to vote, whether it's Democrat, Republican, whether it's nonpartisan elections or whatever, you've got to participate. And I recall being downright evangelical about that, because if we don't have that level of participation, the country's going to go off in weird directions with oligarchs and everything else that could come along with it. But in terms of the controversial topics that you can talk about in school, and again, I know you're a nonpartisan organization, so we're talking about this from a general standpoint, but the fact that there are politicians out there that would like to limit what topics can be discussed in classrooms has got to be, I don't think alarming is too strong a word for how some of your colleagues might feel about this.
No, I do think that a lot of people in the civics education world are alarmed by that trend in some states. And luckily, Wisconsin hasn't seen that. We don't have a law that censors teachers and at the state level, but there are local districts that have adopted policies that limit what teachers can talk about in the classroom in terms of specific topics that they're allowed to discuss, or kind of a difficult approval process they need to go through to be able to discuss certain topics. But I think that, that really stems from, I think, some fear and some misconceptions about what really is happening in the classroom. And that's where there's real opportunity for everyone across the state to engage with their local school leaders to advocate for really good practices in their local area, because high quality civics education is going to have huge benefits in the long term for their community. You need to grow your own local leaders, right? And so I think there's a great opportunity to talk to school administrators and school board members about the importance of giving teachers the freedom to bring those really controversial issues into the classroom, and then do it in a way that's appropriate and that, gives students opportunity to hear multiple perspectives. That's really essential.
So where do we go from here? People, with the election over, a lot of folks just kind of unplug. But the fact of the matter is, obviously, education is a year-round thing. And so the need for civics education is. And I see participation here and resources from the Wisconsin Elections Commission and Keep Our Republic and the League of Municipalities and the Civics Renewal Network. But what about at that local, parent community level? Are there things that they can do to assist, your efforts to teach more civics?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. One is at the local level. Wisconsin has a strong tradition of local control of schools. And so there is an opportunity. And also, it's really essential that local community members are engaging in conversations with their school leaders about this, and to make sure that that this is a focus in the schools, that this is a priority. And at the state level, we're really interested in mobilizing some funding for civics education, because there is really none at this point.
Perfectly timed as we head into a new legislative session and a new state budget. Kate Ullman from the Wisconsin Civic Learning Coalition, thank you so much again. Happy holidays to you.
Thank you so much.